Welcome back to another session on Entrepreneurship Development Program. So, in this session, we are going to see about three main topics. One is the emerging trends in entrepreneurship, which is very much related to EDP. Another one is phases of EDP, and then some related concepts of EDP. So, the first topic we are going to see about is emerging trends in entrepreneurship. So, any and every topic we take in this point of time, you have some emerging trends going on, especially with the development of technology. There are always something new coming up, and some emerging trends are always cropping up. So what are the main attractions as far as entrepreneurship is concerned? So entrepreneurship has been a growing discipline. We have heard much more about entrepreneurship in the past decade than in the previous years. So if you consider, it's said that the very first entrepreneurship major was offered in the University of Texas in 1964, and it wasn't until the 90s or even 2000s that you start hearing about entrepreneurship, and people are colleges and institutions started offering majors and programs on entrepreneurship, be it a diploma course or even a degree program, dedicated degree program. It wasn't until the later 90s or 2000s that there were people started giving importance to entrepreneurship as a major. Earlier it was considered part of management and then part of HR, but it wasn't a separate phenomenon as such. But now entrepreneurship, we have gone as far as to state that entrepreneurship is a backbone of an economy. So entrepreneurship has gained major significance in the past 2 decades. So now that there is more education and research dedicated to this particular discipline, we are noticing much more innovation, creativity, and changes taking place in regards to entrepreneurship. So I've listed six examples of emerging trends in entrepreneurship. There are much more, but I want to discuss about these six emerging trends. Might be touch upon some other emerging trends at a later point of time. So the first one is startup accelerators. So startup accelerators, this did not startup accelerators or incubators or these sandboxes, these kind of words did not come into our vocabulary until the recent past. So now we've started talking a lot about crowdfunding and boot camps. Boot camps weren't a phenomenon. Boot camps was a very physical words. When you think of boot camps, you think about military and you think about the physical exercise that's going on, physical work that's going on. You don't think in terms of business when you think about boot camps. But these words, these vocabularies have somehow infiltrated into our day-to-day vocabulary in terms of business, and that's a fascinating concept. So these startup accelerators, they've suddenly popped up all over the country. These are often privately funded and mostly used by tech startups, especially in India. Especially when you take India as an example, you have majorly tech startups, right? Because we are into services. Our economy depends much more on service industry. So these are usually mostly used by tech startups, and these accelerators help companies with strongest potential of success obtain funding in exchange for equity. So they are these mediators between people who are willing to fund and people with strong entrepreneurship ideas. So if you are in need of funding, or even need of motivation, or need of fine tuning your product or services, you can consult these startup accelerators. The second one is sandbox. So more and more here we don't call it student sandbox. Student sandbox is a very western word. Here we normally use the word called as incubators, but not everyone, one of us are even familiar with incubators. So more and more universities and colleges are now developing these student sandboxes or incubators, and on and off campus to support student groups. So these incubators or sandboxes, they operate inside the college, sometimes inside the college, sometimes off campus also, but they focus much more on developing and mentoring student startups teams. So if I remember correctly, our past principal, Professor R. Ganesan, he was talking about these students who developed soda cans, and they were selling soda. Our college students who were selling soda cans out of our canteen. They created the idea. They came up with the idea while they were studying, and they obtained some funding with the help of our professors, and our professors were the main major motivators, and they did pretty well inside the college campus. So this is how these incubators work. Incubators, they focus more on mentoring than uh, funding or that financial part of things. So these programs, they provide students with the opportunity to win sometimes seed money, grants, business services, and receive coaching and mentorship. So if a student comes with a blueprint, a business plan, a professor or a coach will, or a mentor will help in fine tuning that business plan and get the seed money that is needed to develop the product. All right. Next one is crowdfunding. We are all very familiar with the crowdfunding, especially when media is concerned, because media and movies, they are turning towards crowdfunding. We have heard about many movies that are crowdfunded rather than produced by a particular producer. These actors and screenwriters, if they have a very valid script and if they really want to work on it, and if they don't get the money that is required, they are coming out and seeking help from the audience. And audience, if the audience feel that they deserve the kind of money that is needed, they invest into the product. So this is what crowdfunding is all about. But crowdfunding can't be done by a person himself, because that involves rigorous marketing processes. So there are these mediators who help in accumulating the funding from the crowd, right? And next one is, I'm very sorry about the spelling mistake there. Next one is co-working spaces, also known as co-working communities. These spaces provide entrepreneurs and small business owners with collaborative and open environment to work in. So this is very similar to a business incubator, but there are no actual offices or cubicles for individual business. And these tenants, they are basically tenants in a building, and these tenants are encouraged to collaborate and support one another. And see, most of the times these people, if you take graffiti artists, for example, people who are into graphics and they do multimedia works, and people who create jingles for advertisements, who come up with the small jingles and music bits for advertisements, they work out of home. And working out of home gets very lonely, and they seek these coffee shops or major parks and places where they can actually meet people. Places where they don't feel so lonely, and faces where they're not encompassed in. So these kind of places, they can use these places, they can have their own place to work in, and they'll also have other entrepreneurs who they can interact with. So majorly, there are these group of people who are unrelated to one another, and they cohabited in one place. So these are called as co-working spaces. Next one is a boot camp. A boot camp is an intense hands-on program for small business owners. Now, this is more related to EDP. Boot camps and fully online entrepreneurship degrees are more related to EDP than the other programs. Of course, all the other programs are also very much related to EDP, but boot camps and fully online entrepreneurship degree is where it's what EDP is all about. So, boot camps will focus more attention on teaching and the practical application of new venture creation as in a small business management within a short period of time. Their aim is to help teach, equip, and direct entrepreneurs. So there is this growing trend in entrepreneurship boot camps dedicated to teaching and training military veterans. Actually, boot camps, since it came from the military, word basically came from the military space, right? So it has that kind of morality and that kind of discipline. Whatever you do in a military boot camp, these boot camps are that intense. You can't easily excel at these boot camps if you aren't really into the program. So that is all about boot camps. And finally, fully online entrepreneurship degree. So there used to be a lot of resistance to the idea of offering an entrepreneurship major fully online in higher education, simply because entrepreneurship is very much a hands-on degree that cannot be, that has to be practiced also. Entrepreneurship, we can go on and on about it, we can talk at length about it, but unless and until you have some practical exposure to it, some kind of practical exposure or practical exposure to it, it doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, it will not make sense. So many academics and institutions felt that entrepreneurship must be taught in a traditional classroom by a full-time business faculty, because though the practical exposure is needed, you also needed to know the theory behind it, the what is the working of that. So integration of both these was necessary. Integration of classroom teaching, the traditional teaching, and the practical way of learning was needed. So the answer was fully online entrepreneurship degree, where with the innovation in technology, growth in social media interaction, and funding options that are being generated online, more and more universities have come up with the virtual option of teaching entrepreneurship. So by day they can learn entrepreneurship in a traditional manner, and after their classes they can actually go out and practice their course. For example, there are these um, small coffee shops or small eateries that only function in the evenings or when people start coming back from their offices, right? So in the mornings they can actually learn what's going on in a business, in an entrepreneurship. When you come up with a startup, what actually happens there, you learn it in a theoretical manner, and in the evening you can actually start applying it. So this is the idea behind fully online entrepreneurship degree.